We're all being told to get very agitated about the terrible consequences of climate change. I saw a UN official say, we really can't even call it global warming. It's now global boiling. Global boiling. Well, it is a little bit boiling hot right now in the Sahara Desert. It's also, as we might colloquially say, boiling hot here in Texas. But it's really no more boiling hot than it is in the summer in Texas anyway. And if you've been to the Sahara Desert, it's pretty hot there much of the year. Debbie and I were actually at a swimming pool yesterday, and Debbie's like, well, if it was boiling hot in February, then they might have a point. Then we might look twice. But we're seeing nothing different than we're accustomed to. Some years are hotter, some years are colder. Even the claim that this is the hottest year in history, all you have to do is go back to recorded history and you'll find hotter years. And then, of course, there are eons and eons of unrecorded history which are being lumped in. And as if to say, Ilhan Omar, you remember, tweeted out something like, this is the hottest year in 130,000 years. And I'm like, show me some measurements from 129,000 years ago so I can compare it to what's going on now. Of course, she has none. No one's done any. There weren't any human beings on the earth at the time. No one could do any. So none of this is based upon temperature observations, even though it's intended to give the misleading impression that it is. Now, there's a very interesting fact about all this that goes ignored in this debate, and it is quite simply that cold every year kills a lot more people than heat. So let's think about that for a minute, because if that is true, and it is manifestly, demonstrably true, and it's true, by the way, not just in cold areas of the world, it's true in hot areas. If you consider a country like India, which is by and large a warm country, in fact, we go to India, Debbie and I do sometimes in the winter, and it's like in the temperatures in the late 60s or early 70s. That's in the winter. So at least in the parts of India we go to, now there are other parts of India, New Delhi and so on, that are colder. Obviously, it's very cold up north near the Himalayas. But the point being, India has far more cold deaths than it does heat deaths. Now, if you cogitate or ruminate on that fact for a moment, you'll realize that a little bit of warming is going to be good for the world in reducing cold deaths. Because if there are people dying of cold and the planet is getting a little bit warmer, and we are talking about a little bit warmer, the climate, even if you listen to the climate change activists or look at all the studies that climate-funded groups are putting out, they're talking about warming in the range of 1 to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that's over 100 years. So the question is, what is the impact of the climate getting a little bit warmer? And this simple fact about cold deaths shows you, and the data, by the way, about cold deaths is coming from a respected scientific magazine, The Lancet, but supported in many other sources. Cold deaths outnumber heat deaths somewhere between 5 and 15 times. And that means for every guy who dies from a heat death, 5 to 15 people are dying from cold deaths. Now, another thing to notice is that this fact is almost never mentioned in articles about climate change. They never say this. Why? Because to say it is immediately to raise the question, well, wait a minute, couldn't we use a little bit of warming? Doesn't it have some positive effects? The Lancet itself, which provides the data, at the same time is promoting global warming, and what they do is they create a fake graph. And by fake graph, what I mean is instead of showing the cold deaths and the heat deaths on the same graph using the same measure, what they do is they make the heat deaths 5 times larger on the graph. So it's almost like in the cold graph, you're measuring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on the other graph, you're measuring 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. The point I'm trying to make is not to use actual numbers, but just to show that the two graphs are not commensurate. You have sort of manipulated the graphs to make the heat deaths look bigger than they are. And so what's going on here is an effort to distort the truth. And the truth is this, that the warming that we're seeing is, again, not even. It's not occurring all over the world. It is occurring more in cold areas. So think about it. What this means is that there is less warming in existing hot areas And there is more warming in cold areas that presumably could use a little bit of warming. Not only that, not only is the warming concentrated in colder areas like the Arctic, it's also more at colder times of the day and during colder seasons. So you find that colder times of the day warm a little, colder seasons warm a little, and the point being again that when you consider that cold deaths are the most common form of deaths, you have to then ask, how is this the catastrophe it is being portrayed to be? Final point I want to make is that whether the Earth is getting colder or hotter, one way you protect people from all this is central air, central heat, air conditioning. These are ways that human beings can adapt and respond to changing temperatures. If it's really hot outside, get inside where it's cooler. But guess what? Those things require fossil fuels. And everybody knows that. And the Indians and Chinese know that. They need, and they're developing coal plants and other forms of fossil fuels for the obvious reason that they know that they need energy in part to protect their own populations from the heat and from the cold. We all get some aches and pains as we get older, and if you're looking for a remedy, there is one. It's called Relief Factor. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago now. The difference we've seen in our joints, nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more because it works for them. Debbie's a true believer. She can do exercises now that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a big game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4-RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again to call, 800-4-RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. You'll feel the difference.